Mary Hosty, the Irish servant girl who came to Otago with her employers and became the anchor of a family migration chain.
Mary Desmond's story connects two separate strands of identity and pioneer Otago, both of them Irish, but one from the upper echelons of Irish society and the other from nearer the bottom. Her family were tenant farmers here in Grange Parish in the townland of Clashahany. But when Mary came to Otago in 1858 on the Agra from London, she came as a servant to a newly married couple, Edward and Anastasia Musgrave. They were Anglo-Irish Protestants, the landlord class here in Ireland. Indeed, the Musgraves were one of the most important families in County Waterford, owning a lot of its land and dominating its affairs. Edward Musgrave's maternal grandfather was in fact the Anglican Archbishop of all Ireland, so you couldn't get much more establishment than that. This was their family home, Turin House at Kappa. Later it passed into the hands of the Jameson family of whisky fame, and today it's a major tourist attraction in County Waterford.
By the late 1850s, Edward and Anastasia Musgrave were very welcome in Presbyterian Otago as fellow Protestants, while Edward's high social status as the younger son of a baronet saw him quickly appointed to be a Justice of the Peace and then a resident magistrate.
He bought land and went into partnership in several sheep runs, including here at Glenore, or the Woolshed as it was more popularly known. Edward and his wife had a son here, and he was chairing the committee to establish an Anglican congregation in Tokomairero, so in many ways he would have become a local squire figure, much like the position his brother would inherit back in Ireland. But then in 1861, the gold was discovered at nearby Gabriel's Gully, and a horde of eager miners poured right through the Musgrave property on their way inland. Edward and his household seemed to have accepted this invasion with good grace, providing food and accommodation to the miners. But playing host to the great unwashed wasn't what Edward Musgrave had been looking for in coming to the colonies, and within a couple of years, he had had enough of Otago.
At the end of 1863, he sold up his properties and he and Anastasia sailed for Argentina with their young son. They didn't find what they were looking for there either. After stints back in Ireland, they eventually settled on Vancouver Island, Canada, where they established a 7,000-acre ranch at Musgrave's Landing and brought up a large family. Edward died there, an esteemed member of the local establishment, in 1911.
Mary Desmond, meanwhile, kept working for the Musgraves, seemingly right up to the time of their departure from Otago, and if so, much of the heavy work of looking after the crowd of miners at the Woolshed would have fallen on her shoulders. Subsequently, she moved to Hawkesbury, now called Waikowhati, to work for Johnny Jones. Then in 1867, she married an English-born farm labourer called John Hosty, or Hosty, the name appears in various forms. They lived here for the next 4 decades, earning a living off their few acres at the corner of Edinburgh and Aberdeen streets, and living in this 4-room cottage with a big garden. It was a humble sort of life, but successful enough in its own terms for a girl from rural Waterford. Mary and her husband don't seem to have had any children, but her obituary records that she was a kind-hearted neighbour, and where sickness was, she was always there to assist.
As an Irish Catholic, Mary Desmond had been lucky to get into Otago in the 1850s without paying her own fare, but that was beginning to change. Other Catholic Irish from County Galway had been slowly making inroads into the previously restrictive Otago immigration program, sending home for their friends and relations.
Mary did the same. Her half-brother Patrick arrived as an assistant immigrant in 1860, and then he in turn sponsored their younger sister Julia, along with her husband John Reardon and their baby daughter. The Reardons then had another baby in the colony, but unfortunately Julia died a few months later, and then a few years later her husband died too, probably leaving Mary literally holding the baby and caring for her young niece and nephew. Her brother Patrick, meanwhile, also struggled in the colony. In 1876, he was arrested here in Invercargill for vagrancy and found to be of unsound mind. He was a schoolteacher and claimed that he couldn't get any work because of his political views. More likely it was due to his mental state, but his Irishness and religious affiliation probably didn't help.
He may have turned to drink and seems to have suffered from delusional paranoia. Patrick was committed to the Seacliff Asylum, where he was to spend the rest of his life. He died there in 1913, aged 75.
The Desmond family stand in for lots of other Irish Catholic immigrants who came to Otago in the pioneer era. Getting here in the first place was quite an achievement. Prospering was another challenge altogether. Many Irish Catholic immigrants did so, but for others, mental illness, poverty and criminality were their lot, more so than for any other founding group in the pioneer population. But nonetheless, family networks were really important to Irish families, whether they were successful or not. And this grave, in the Catholic section of Dunedin Southern Cemetery, really showcases that, because all three Desmond siblings are buried here together. They left Grange Parish in Waterford. They had very different life trajectories here in the colony, but in the end, they were all together, buried here in this grave.